Hello everybody, today what we're going to do is solve quadratics by using square root. So far we already know how to factor quadratics. We get everything equal to 0, we factor and set each part equal to 0. We can graph if it's in vertex or standard form and the x-intercepts are your solutions. Or we can solve things by using quadratics by using the quadratic formula. There's a new method though, you can solve by using square roots. Now this is actually a very helpful method, but it only works if there's an x squared term and no x term. So for instance, if you had x squared minus 11 equals 0, you could use square roots with that one. But if you had x squared minus 11x equals 0, you could not use square roots for that one. So we are looking again for an x squared term, but no x term. So the way it works is you are going to get the square root or the x squared term alone first. After you get the x squared term alone and move everything to the other side, you take the square root of both sides and you write plus or minus when you do that. So looking at number 1 here, you notice how x squared is already by itself. In order to undo the square, we are going to do the inverse operation and we're going to square root. Now the square root of x squared becomes just x. The square root of 25 is 5, but because x here is being squared, that 5 could have been positive or negative in order to get 25 out. So anytime you square root, you have to have that plus or minus symbol. So our two answers for this are x equals positive 5 and negative 5. Now number 2 is going to be the same method. I notice I have my x squared term and there's no x. So I say, hey, I can solve this with using square roots. So the first thing I need to do is get that x squared term by itself. So we're going to go ahead and divide both sides by 3 because the 3 is not being squared. Negative 24 divided by 3 is going to be negative 8. And then we say, let's get rid of that square. We're going to go ahead and square root both sides. So the square root of x squared is x. On the right-hand side, we have plus or minus, and we have the square root of negative 8. So we have two different things to deal with. Let's deal with the 8 first. As a reminder, when you square root something like that, we want to look for number pairs we can bring out. So there's a pair of 2's we're going to bring out, and there's 1 2 left behind. The other thing we need to deal with is that negative sign. So the square root of a negative is going to be an imaginary number. So when we simplify the square root of negative 8, that's going to become 2i root 2. So overall, we do get two solutions. It's plus or minus 2i root 2. For C, we're going to do the same method here. I notice I have my x squared term and no x term. So I'm going to get this x squared by itself. So I'm going to subtract 242 from both sides. Then I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 2. And so I get x squared equals negative 121. I'm going to go ahead and square root both sides. On the left-hand side, we get x. On the right-hand side, we get plus or minus. The square root of 121 is 11. And then the square root of negative 1 is I. So we get x equals plus or minus 11i. Thank you very much, and I hope it helps you solve quadratics by using square roots.